Check, 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 check.
We'll now call the Tuesday, February 9, 2021 regular meeting of council to order. First item on the agenda is adoption of tonight's agenda. Councillor G, Councillor Blanchette, and I will just add, sorry, that the agenda be amended to include item 6.1, Southeastern BC Regional Connectivity Committee MOU. Are you okay with that, Councillor G? Councillor Blanchette? Any further amendments? Additions? All in favor? Carries. Item 3.1, adoption of the January 26, 2021 regular meeting of council will be adopted as presented. Councillor McLean, Councillor Pearson, any errors or omissions arising? All in favor? Carries. Item 3.2, we have a couple of public hearings to adopt their minutes. First one being October 13, 2020. Councillor G, Councillor Blanchette, any errors or omissions arising? All in favor? Carried. And the minutes of January 26, 2021 public hearing be adopted as presented. Councillor McLean, Councillor Pearson, any errors or omissions arising? All in favor? Carries. And finally, we have under 3.3, adoption of the minutes of the special meeting held on January 29th, 2021 be adopted. Councillor Blanchette, Councillor G, any errors or omissions arising? All in favor? Carried. We will have a delegation tonight. We are joined by BC Assessment. They will provide a 2021 overview, and we have Mr. Johnson. Good to see you again.
Hello there.
The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. I'll just share my screen. There we go. I think that should be just the PowerPoint in front of you now. All right, can everyone hear me okay? Yes, okay, I'll proceed. Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. I'd just like to provide an overview of the assessment and the 2020-21 assessment role to the Village of Valemount. This will be fairly similar to what I provided last year, so some of it might be a bit repetitive, but as we get into the data, it will be new, up-to-date information for your community. Just to quickly highlight some of the things we'll go over, a little bit of history about BC assessment, the types of valuation that we do, property classification, some of the key dates around our assessment cycle throughout the year, talk a little bit about the relationship between assessment and taxes, and then get more into the details of the 2021 assessment role overview. And then I'll end on a little bit of information about the appeal process. So just a recap of some of the history of BC assessment. We were created back in 1974 under the Assessment Authority Act, and we are a provincial crown corporation, which means we're operating independent of taxing functions and government and politics. Our mandate is to provide uniform and fair property assessments to all of the BC property owners. And you can see from when we started, our first assessment role had 879,000 properties assessed. Today, there's over 2.1 million assessed. So a lot of growth over those years. And what we actually provide on the assessment roll is the annual list of property values, which identifies also ownership, valuation, property classification, and any exemptions that are applicable to those properties. Provincially, that represents over 2 million properties and a total value on the roll of $2 trillion. So what that does is it provides that stable, predictable base for local governments and taxing authorities to raise money in your community. And provincially, that's over $8 billion annually in property taxes for your services, schools, hospitals, etc. So the way we value properties, most properties are valued at market value. and that's as of July 1st each year. And as you can see by the definition, market value is the most probable price that a property will bring in an open and competitive market. There's also some properties on the roll that are valued through legislated rates. So these are properties such as major industrial, power lines, gas lines, sawmills, etc. And even farmland is a regulated rate. And for property classification, there are the 9 classes of properties. That's by regulation, and BC assessment determines, based on the use of the property, which classification it goes into. In the village of Valemount, there are 5 classes that are currently in use: residential, utility, business and other, recreational, nonprofit, and light industry. And the key dates around the year that we follow: during January, which we've just come through, that's our primary time when we've just released the assessment roll. Property owners are receiving their assessment, and they have a chance to phone us and ask questions about their assessment. So that's between January 1st and January 31st. If somebody's not satisfied, they can appeal to the Property Assessment Review Panel. The deadline is actually January 31st. However, when January 31st falls on a weekend, it defaults to February 1st. So for this year, February 1st was the appeal deadline. During February and March, the Property Assessment Review Panel hears the cases up till March the 15th. And then after that, we produce the revised roll that reflects the corrections that took place during the review panel hearings. Between April and September, that's the primary time of the year where we're working on various assessment projects, collecting new construction, looking at physical changes to properties, auditing our assessment roll, and creating the next year's assessments. April 30th is the statutory date for anyone that was not satisfied with their Property Assessment Review Panel hearing. They can appeal to the Property Assessment Appeal Board. And again, July 1st is the valuation date for all properties. As we move towards the end of the year, between October and December, that's our primary roll production, where we're actually starting to set rates. We've reviewed our sales, we've conducted our analysis, and we're actually putting the values into the assessment roll. We look at the physical condition and permitted use of each property on October 31st. And the ownership records reflect November 30th as they stand in the Land Title Service Authority. And the liability for taxation is December 31st. So if a property was owned by, say, the provincial crown, and a taxable occupier was occupying it by December 31st, it would be taxable, and we would add that to the assessment roll. So this slide is one that is also on our public website, and I just like to refer to it because we're often asked this question: when my assessment goes up, let's say in this example, 20%, I can't afford my taxes to go up 20%. So there's the 2 functions involved. There's BC assessment setting the property values, and there's the taxing jurisdictions creating their budgets and determining how those values are going to have the tax distributed. So what we basically like to tell people is that, assuming the local government does not change their budget, if your assessment rose at a similar rate to the average for your property class, it's not likely that your taxes would change, because presumably the mill rate would be adjusted to reflect that. And also, if your assessment's gone up higher than the average, then chances are pretty good that you will see a tax increase. It's hard on our end because we don't know, we're not setting the taxes, but sometimes this explanation helps people understand it a little bit better, how it might affect them. So moving into a few highlights, I've listed on this slide both the provincial changes as well as the village of Valemount. And these are comparisons of the 2021 actual values, which are the market values, on the completed roll, as compared to last year's 2020 revised roll. So what that means is the revised roll that came out after the review panel hearings in March of last year, we're comparing against that. And as you can see, there's been some increases provincially, both in the number of properties and the total value. In Valemount, there's been a slight decrease in the total properties. Basically, what's changed there is there's one less folio assessed this year. And that could be for a number of reasons. It might have been a property where somebody amalgamated the property lines and two properties have now become one. Sometimes that happens. The total actual value on your roll this year went up by 2.5% and sits at $231.9 million. And your total non-market change, which is essentially the new money to the assessment roll for new taxation, is 5.17 million. That's down about 25% from last year. However, it still is in the millions. So taking a bit of a closer look at the completed roll, this particular slide shows you the general values, which means those are the taxable values. And I've broken it down by property class just so you can get a little better understanding of what that means. Generally, for the most part, not a whole lot of change by class. The biggest change is the rec nonprofit category. And what's happened there is there was a campground in your community that is no longer classified as a campground. So it came out of the recreation nonprofit category and went into the business and other. And I've put a little footnote there because there's that one row that says S.644 LGA. That's just broken out for the purpose of you administering your financial records. Under the Local Government Act, Section 644, certain utility companies such as telephone, closed circuit utilities, they're taxed at a percentage of gross rentals from their subscribers. So we just code that with a tax code so that you can actually see what the value of those properties are. And that's why that shows up as a separate item on your roll. This graph here gives you a bit of a trend on those net general taxable values over the last 10 years. You can see you've had pretty steady growth over that time, with the last 2 years approaching the 200 million mark. And back to the non-market change part of it. So within the village, as I said, there's 5.17 rounded million dollars of essentially new taxable revenue from properties. You'll see a couple of decreases there. Just to explain that, the residential vacant, what happens there are those were previously vacant properties where somebody's built a house now, or we've discovered there's some structures there. So we've taken it out of the vacant category and it's now part of the residential single family category. And as well, you'll see an increase in your business and other of 2.2 million. Part of that is there's a work camp that went in your community, and that right now is in the business and other category. And I just wanted to provide this distribution of values for the town, because what it does is it kind of shows you there's been a range of valuation changes. In your residential grouping, most property owners saw a change of anywhere from -5% to roughly +5, +10. But there are outliers as well. And in the business and other category, predominantly they were sitting around 0% or no change, but there have been a few. In particular, some of the hotels had a bit of a decrease given the lower revenue on those properties last year. Just to give you a bit of a sampling of the northern assessment area, I've just included various communities and arrayed the percent change for the median value for single family dwellings. You can see that There's been communities that have gone down around the 8% range to increases as high as 21% in Burns Lake. So overall for the village of Valemount, your median single family dwelling has just marginally gone up. And this chart is provided just to give you a bit of a sense of the number of sales and the average selling price. So the vertical light blue lines are the number of sales, and the horizontal dark blue line is the average sale price over the months over last year. And if you look at it, probably on average, it roughs out around $250,000. And just a couple more slides here. I just wanted to touch on the appeal process. So to reiterate those dates, February the 1st was the actual appeal deadline for the first level of appeal at the Property Assessment Review Panel. The hearings take place from February all the way to March 15th. And at that time, we complete it and produce the revised assessment roll. And if someone is still not satisfied with their decision at the review panel, they have until April 30th to appeal to the next level, which is the Property Assessment Appeal Board. So I wanted to show you a bit of a 5-year history of the trend of appeals. So I've got 3 things showing there. The provincial trend is the dark blue line. The red line is our assessment region, which is all of northern BC, which runs from 70 Mile House in the south all the way up to the Yukon border. And then I've got your community, Valemount, with the statistics showing. So they're all under 2%, which is what we aim to have is below 2% where possible. And in your case, what that means in terms of actual appeal numbers, the last couple of years have sat at 0.8%. That's actually 7 appeals. And the high year, 2018, was 12 appeals. And just before doing the presentation, I ran the 2021 numbers because we're just finally getting the rest of any appeal letters that are coming in. So for Valemount, there are 6 appeals that we have right now. So pretty much in line with the last couple of years. And this last slide is just an example of the completed assessment roll that we produced. So the one that's just come out in January of this year, as compared to the revised roll that will come out in March after the review panel hearings. So again, when you look back at the 5-year history, you can see how stable the roll's been. The low year that it dropped was 2018, and that correlates back to the last slide where there were more appeals, which meant there were more changes to the roll. So it's just kind of a sample of how stable your roll is sitting. And when you look at the overall average trend line through it, you're probably in the 0.3% range, which is a fairly stable roll. So that concludes the information that I have. I'm happy to take any questions if you have any.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. It's always nice to hear from our partners at BC Assessment. We'll just take a moment to receive the delegation. Councillor G, Councillor Blanchette, or any questions for the presenter? Councillor Blanchette?
So I just have a quick one. So I'm just wondering how, when, let's say I'm looking at my tax assessment and it says my property went down 2% and my neighbor has gone up 3% and nobody's done any work to their houses. How is that?
Yeah, that can happen from time to time. One of the things that did happen in your community last year was we did a review of property assessments using aerial imagery. We call it desktop review. So it's using aerial and oblique images to review the properties. We can measure, we can see if there's been changes. So some of the changes that you may see as a result of that. The other could be the way that the market has reacted for the category of house. Now, I don't know, without having details, what your houses might look like compared to the neighbors. But if there's any information that we added because of physical change or information that was brought to our attention, or during an inquiry or whatever that might be, that may be part of the reason for the difference.
Is that all? Yeah. Is that okay? Any other questions for the presenter? Darren, if I could, some residents have received an advance notice this year along with their assessment, advising them that their 2021 assessment will remain the same as 2020, but they've been put on notice that their 2022 assessment will go up. Is this based on area sales between, say, July and October of 2020, and it just wasn't put onto the 2021 assessment?
So that's new information to me. I wasn't aware of that. I'm not sure why we would advise that the 2022 would go up, because we haven't analyzed the data yet for 2022.
That's what I was thinking. Interesting, thank you.
What might have happened, we do send out advance notification to people in December if their assessment is going up significantly more than the average for their area. That might have been what's happened.
Thanks.
Your worship.
Councilor Pearson.
Yeah, one quick question. Just when you were going through the slide on non-market change, you showed like 822,000 moved from residential vacant, and you said it moved into residential single family, which doesn't show an increase. Would that 822 not bump up that value in the single family category?
There is the 4.2 million of the residential single family that's an increase. That is non-market change.
Okay.
So that 822 that I was referring to it came out of the vacant and it did go into residential single family.
Okay. No, thanks.
Okay.
Further questions, comments? Well, again, Mr. Johnson, I really appreciate you taking the time to present to council this evening. You probably have a busy schedule ahead of you throughout this time with other municipalities in northern BC. So I guess I won't wish you safe travels because we're doing it from afar, but have a great year at BC Assessment.
Thank you very much. And if any questions come up after the presentation, feel free to send me your questions. You can direct them maybe through Wayne. We've done that before, and he can get me the question and I can provide an answer.
That's terrific. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All in favor of receipt? Carries. We do have that new item on the agenda under 6.1, an MOU with the Southeastern BC Regional Connectivity Committee. Recommendation here that the authorized person from the village signs the attached. Councillor Blanchette. Councillor McLean, any questions arising? So we've signed an MOU like this previously. It was with the Regional Connectivity Committee. They've just rebranded and there's just been a couple of subtle changes within it. For everyone's highlight. All in favor? Group sign. Carries. Anything out of the reading file folks would like to highlight? Councillor Blanchette.
Just item 3, the North Central or NCLGA's board highlights. They have a healthcare committee, and I just wanted to let everybody know that they're going to be doing a survey. They'll be sending that out to here, and so we should be paying attention to that because that'll be some good information that we can get back to them, and then that'll help move the committee forward. So that was all.
Thank you. Further highlights? So under 8.1, we have a COVID-19 safe restart grants for local governments. And a recommendation here that we approve funding of the recommended projects. Councillor McLean, Councillor Blanchette. Any questions, comments, discussion? Will be nice to have washrooms open again. Councillor Blanchette?
The portable sign and the stationary LED board, how big are they?
So the stationary sign would be approximately 5 by 8. Whereas the portable sign, that's a good question. I can't remember the exact size of it, but it's one size smaller than what you would see on a highway when you're driving down and has those changeable message boards. Be slightly smaller than
And
that.
we're going to be moving this board around depending on what kind of announcements we're going to be making with it and stuff?
That's the point of that
And
one,
then the
yes.
stationary one would be,
The information that would be situated just outside the village office that would be available for visitors and residents to see.
okay. And I did have one other question. For the Visitor Information Center, it says here, staff member you're going to hire to sanitize the info center. Is this full-time, part-time? Like, how is that position working? And if we're going to be sanitizing that bathroom, what about the ones in the park? Like what's going on there?
I'll maybe defer that to the Director of Finance, if you're there, Laurie.
I am. For the Visitor Information Center, we are looking at a part-time staff member that goes along as a counselor to help sanitize. We didn't discuss the parks as Public Works is usually there.
Sorry, I have one more. So there also too, at the end of this, it's got remaining money is $137,000. Do we have plans for that, or are we keeping it just off to the side, or what?
Again, I'll defer that to Director of Finance.
Currently, we don't have any other plans for that. We'll have to meet with staff again.
It's good to have some in the kitty as we move forward through our.
Well, things might
toward-
come up, right?
Yeah.
And as long as it stays, it's, within the parameters of the grant, then we're fine.
As we move forward towards vaccination.
Mhm.
We may need it. Any further questions, Council, Director of Finance, or the Administrator? All in favor? Carries. And Councillor Pearson, just speak up. Sometimes I won't see a hand.
Yeah, no, we're good.
8.2, we have a child care agreements for 1451 Fifth Avenue.
I'm going to recuse myself as I'm chair of RBCS.
Thank you.
I will also recuse as an employee of RCCS.
Thank you both. 1929. First recommendation that we have is that council directs the CAO to enter into partnering agreement on behalf of the village with Robson Valley Community Services for the construction of a new childcare center and the delivery of 72 childcare spaces at 1451 Fifth Avenue. Councillor McLean, Councillor Pearson, discussion. Been a journey. All in favor? It's carried. And 2, that council directs the CAO to sign the Ministry of Children and Family Development Child Care Capital Funding Program Child Care BC New Spaces Fund funding agreement on behalf of the village. Councillor Pearson, Councillor McLean, discussion. All in favor? Carried. Both 1 and 2 under 8.2 is carried.
Perfect, thank you.
8.3, we have from the Columbia Basin Trust a request for support Universal Broadband Fund application. First recommendation here that the village provide a letter of support to the Innovation, Science, and Economic Development Canada's Universal Broadband Fund program for Columbia Basin Broadband Corporation's application to the program to bring high-speed fiber internet access into the community. Councillor G, Councillor Pearson, How's your connection, Councillor Pearson?
We're doing good tonight.
Any discussion? So you would have seen, as you know, and have conveyed in past council meetings, Councillor Blanchette, to remind us to continue to keep doing those speed tests through CIRA, performance.cira.ca.Columbia Basin, or in the regional district, Fraser Fort George. Keep doing those tests. We weren't able to hit the mark through the Columbia Basin. We needed a 20% to present to the feds. Keep working your channels, your networks to keep those speed tests going, because we are looking at a second application down the road that will open our community a bit wider. Right now, the onus is on residents to convey their speed test to the federal government. And what other large ISPs and telcos did was they went to the feds and they said, we offer this service. This community is served. And the feds said, sounds like they're served. And so they drew a great big green circle around Valemount and said, no, that's fine. Under the assumption that along every street, we have infrastructure to have services. Simply do not. And we will keep fighting the good fight through those speed tests to prove out. And with Chair Gay from the Regional District East Kootenay, we will, the two of us, along with Johnny Strelaya from the Trust, will have a meeting with the Minister of Citizen Services on February 17th to highlight the disparity between what the telcos are saying to the feds and what is actually really happening on the ground level. So hopefully we can get that resolved.
So we need to do a big community push.
Yeah.
Okay.
Your worship, one word on that.
Yes, please.
So, and to your point on the speed test, to emphasize to everybody that's doing it, fill in the information on your connection and your package, and in the comments, make sure that you annotate that 5010 not available.
That's a great point, Councillor. Great point. Any further discussion? All in favor? It's carried. The second recommendation that the village provide up to 5%, $62,500 of the proportionate forecasted infrastructure costs to the Columbia Basin Broadband Corporation, subject to the CBBC's successful application for funding from the Canadian Universal Broadband Fund and NDIT. Councillor McLean, Councillor Pearson, any discussion? You may recall it's coming out of our COVID restart plans. All in favor? It's carried. Under 9.1, we have a recommendation for the Village of Valemount zoning bylaw 610, 2007, amendment bylaw number 835, 2020 to allow site-specific commercial daycare use at 1451 Fifth Avenue. And the recommendation here is to be adopted as presented. Councillor McLean, Councillor Pearson, we are the proponents. Any discussion? All in favor? It's carried. No new business tonight. Any notice of motions arising? Council reports. Councillor Pearson, you're from afar. What did you get up to?
Actually, it's been a fairly productive couple weeks. January 27th, I sat in on a Destination BC webinar, just some pointers on websites and key points and communication. Also on January 27th, had a community health collaborative meeting with our focus on getting a community communication strategy together to get people involved and enrolling in the Healthy Life program, which is an online access to your medical records, EMRs. January 29th, special meeting of council. February 2nd, Tourism Valemount meeting. February 3rd and 4th, I virtually attended the LGLA forum on coming, it's a leadership forum on surviving the new normal. And I forwarded notes to mayor and council. One key thing that came up in pretty much every section of the forum was connectivity. A lot of small communities, rural communities were represented, and connectivity going forward in trying to rebuild a new economy is key. So, that's something we're all working towards. Communication, higher levels of government, local government, and the public, and even within, within council, we're not having that opportunity to have face-to-face meetings, chats, coffees, whatever. So we really need to focus on that. And on the local government side of things, there was a lot of talk on streamlining procedures, especially development procedure bylaws, making things user-friendly, online accessible, and reducing the red tape to focus on trying to get new development in the communities. And Friday, February 5th, Trans-Canada Yellowhead Highway Association meeting. That's my report.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor G.
Not as busy as Councillor Pearson, but I also attended the special meeting on January 29th. And then February 4th, we had our first meeting of the CBT CIP AAP meeting virtually over Zoom. It's going to be a little bit different this year with the public piece of that. We're using a different platform. So it is going to be a little bit different for people. But one of the nice things is that the public input piece is going to be open for a longer period of time. So it gives people a little bit more time to respond rather than just, 2 hours on one evening of a presentation. So I think that might make up for the virtual platform. And we're still figuring out what that platform is going to look like. But yeah, it's promising. And that is my report.
Well, I'm sure going to miss whoever was in charge of the concession.
Yeah, I don't know how we could do that one virtually.
Councillor Blanchette.
The 27th, I too, for the health collaborative. And today, actually, I had my meeting with Healthy Life. So basically what you do is you go onto the site, you sign up, you pick your time and date that you want them to call you. They call you virtually over their computer. Make sure you have your license and your care card there because you have to show that. And then they give you a PIN and they walk you through the process. You're signed up. It takes all of 4 minutes. Excuse me. Very easy process. And there's all your information right there. You have to remember, though, that the information you're seeing is only Northern Health. It's not Interior Health. So that's another hurdle we'll figure out later. But it's a great service. And especially with things like the vaccine coming, and get signed up so that you know what's going on with yourself, right? It's all about taking care of yourself. And on the 29th, I again had the special meeting of council. That's everything.
Thank you. Councillor McLean.
I had only 2 things this time. One was a local government committee for the Columbia River Treaty telecon on Wednesday, the 27th, and I had the special meeting of council on the 29th, and that was it this time.
Do you know when the negotiations will be resuming, or have they resumed?
We're having another meeting Thursday morning, so I'll hear more about it then.
Excellent. Thank you. Pretty quiet for me this time around. 28th, I had a briefing with Municipal Affairs Minister Osborne. 29th, joined you all for a special meeting of council. And on that same day, had a CBT board meeting. And then on the Saturday was a continuation of the CBT board on the 30th. On February the 3rd, I had a planning meeting with the regional district through emergency management, and it was kind of co-hosted with their CAO, Jim Martin, and their community services manager, Michael Higgins. I asked the question, is there any appetite or energy for another table, region-wide tabletop exercise? And they kind of both gave me a funny look, and they're, Willix Creek and Door River kept our EOC at enhanced levels for a good couple of months. Like, let's take a breather. They had actually staffed their EOC at about a 70% level for all of summer and fall. So the need for tabletop exercise was not well received. But moving forward, there are many ways that we will be looking at different things like fire smarting, getting ready for fire season. Mr. Higgins is keeping a close eye on the Australian fire season, can play an indicative role of how the Canadian fire season may play out. It'll give us an opportunity to see not only how fierce it could be down there, but how we get possible safety personnel to and from, and how that works with the Quarantine Act and things of that nature. So keeping a close eye on that. And then just to wrap up, you may notice on both Councillor Pearson, he's had his on for quite some time. The two of us are wearing a small piece of hide on our lapel. The Moose Hide campaign is a grassroots movement of Indigenous and non-Indigenous men and boys who are standing up against violence against women and children. Wearing this moose hide signifies my commitment to honor, respect, and protect the women and children in my life, and to work together with Councillor Pearson to end violence against women and children. So aware of that campaign moving forward. And that's my report. Motion to receive. Councillor G, Councillor Blanchette, any further questions or comments for the reports? All in favor? It's carried. Are there any public comments been received?
There have been no public comments.
Thank you. And then now under 15.1, give notice to proceed in camera for consideration of 2 items per section 91C of the community charter, and to discuss matters related to C, labor relations and other employee relations, and I, the receipt of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. Councillor Blanchette, Councillor G,